Good morning, everybody. Welcome to SafeDefend Live. I am Dave Evans with Dr. Greg Vecchi, the expert extraordinaire on everything school safety when it comes to active killers. And today we're going to talk about a different topic because it's super important for all of our schools and our leaders and our students. It's suicide prevention interventions and when to intervene. And we've talked about suicide prevention in the past, but today we're going to talk about things you can do to help somebody who's struggling, because we are all about taking care of our kids and saving lives. Doc, it's great to see you.
Good to see you, Dave. It's been a while. I've been doing all kinds of training and traveling. It's nice to kind of be back, and I missed the Friday Safe Defend Lives, I'll tell you.
Well, it's good to have you back, and we're excited about today's topic. We're glad you're back from training, and we're ready to put you on the road and get you in front of some schools so we can help them get better, safer, and more comfortable with things that make people uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Well, last time I think a few weeks back when we were talking, I think we covered suicide, like myths and kind of what it is, and kind of some ground truths about it. But that's all well and good. But I think today we should probably focus on prevention and intervention, because this is something that affects so many kids and adults, for that matter, and much more than an active killer or some sort of a targeted violence attack. A suicide, the inward direction of violence to oneself is a problem, and we all know that. And some of the things you got to keep in mind, when you're assessing it, is that there are cues. There are really specific, both direct and indirect cues to suicide. What I mean by that is, if you hear someone speaking and their communication is oriented in the past tense, they leave a verbal will. Like, for example, I want you to make sure my good friend Billy gets my dog. Things like this. Indications or things that make it sound like they're saying goodbye. And verbal stuff. Things like desperation. I can't go on. All my problems are about to go away. Things like that. Behavioral, nonverbal stuff. Things like giving away personal items, even adjusting an insurance policy. For so that their loved ones can get the money, right? Test firing, obtaining weapons is common, and even just unusual slow speech or movements or things like that kind of indicate indecision and withdrawal and things like that. And so when you sense that, the important thing is you got to ask. And that goes back to the biggest myth on suicide is people, they're afraid to ask. They're afraid that, if I ask, I'm going to, get him to do it, or I'm going to, hurry up the process for him. It's not that. By the time that they're giving you these cues and things like this, they have thought about it. And the things that you should be asking that person are things like, are you thinking about killing yourself? And we want to stay away from all the clinical jargon, like, are you going to commit suicide? You just say it plain. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about killing yourself? How long have you been planning that? What are you going to do? How are you going to carry it out? Have you ever thought about killing yourself before? Those are some things to ask, because this is the thing that's foremost on their mind. They're not going to be changing the subject on you. This is exactly where their stress is, and where their trauma is, and where their desperation is the fact that whatever's going on in their life is so bad that violence or death is the answer. We try to frame it as a permanent solution to a temporary problem. When we address this, it kind of, the way it works is that when someone is in crisis and thinks suicide is the answer, first and foremost, they think they can't cope with the situation. They probably tried to cope with the situation. They can't deal with it anymore. And for whatever reason, they can't get help. So then the result is that suicide or death, violence, inward violence, becomes not only an option, but the plan. And all you really have to think about, and it doesn't take a psychiatrist, a psychologist, anybody with any sort of degree, just to notice these things, Sit the person down and talk to them. Become that social support. Let them, because usually, things that we're looking for are things in their life, like, big losses and things like this. And while we're doing this, you got to realize that they're going to be very emotional. But one of the other things to keep in mind, which I think is hard to do, is to check your own ego or check your own perceptions at the door. When you're talking to the person, regardless, like if they say, well, they're talking about the plan and they have done something with your insurance money. Okay. Well, the first thing a lot of times people think and actually say that can be a problem is they'll immediately counter and say something like, well, the insurance money isn't going to pay out on suicide. That is not what we should be doing. It's not what we're there to do. It doesn't help their perception of things, because the thing is, it's their trauma. It's their problem, and we have to be there, being non-judgmental, empathetic, and looking at it from their perspective. I'd probably say that one of the things that I found in my experience working with suicidal people is trying to create a dilemma. And what I mean by that is, when you're talking to them, listen for things in their story that is positive, that are important to them, such as maybe a family, their kids. I had a situation where I was negotiating with a man who was going to commit suicide. He had lost his job, and he was very distraught about it. And for whatever reason, he decided that if he kills himself, he had lots of insurance money, and he was going to go ahead and do that. And instead of focusing on the insurance money and about how that's not going to happen, I sat back and wanted to listen and say, well, tell me about what's going on. And he starts to talking about, well, what are some things in your life that are positive? Who do you love? And immediately he went to his kids, and he talked about his kids, about how he wanted to be he's a good role model for them, how he wants them to, be good men when they grow up. He teaches them how to hunt, how to fish, how to be a man, how to be polite, how to get involved in the community. And he did this regularly with his kids, and he just lit up when he was talking about his kids. And so in creating, that dilemma, instead of focusing on how the insurance money isn't going to work or trying to go down some road, you stick with the things, because you can't force someone or try to persuade or convince someone not to kill themselves. You have to talk to them in a manner where they come to that conclusion or that realization themselves, as to, hey, I don't want to kill myself today. And so focusing on things. So what I did in this example was I focused on the kids. I said, well, Bob, it seems that you really, really love your kids. He goes, oh my God, yeah, I love my boys. They're just the reason why I want to live, right? And I said, well, if that's the case, if you kill yourself today, your boys are going to lose their best friend. And it was just a matter of reflecting back what was important to him. And he didn't kill himself that day. He realized that if he killed himself, certainly the money would take care of them to a certain degree, assuming that it did pay. But more importantly, it wasn't about the money for his kids. It was about the relationship that they had. Yeah. And so, when you're talking about suicide intervention and things like this, you really have got to listen. You've got to use lots of pauses, let them vent, and keep them on, what's important in their life. And then you can go down and start talking about, things to do as far as alternatives to suicide, help that you could possibly get for that person. But they're not going to be ready to listen to you until you've dealt with the suicide and the idea of presenting some sort of a dilemma based on hooks, right? On things that are important in their lives. And they'll tell you what's important in their life, and they will tell you what's not important in their life. And so staying on that as kind of an approach has worked really, really well. in my experience, and this is what I would take to schools and workplaces and anywhere else where you do suicide intervention, is to look at it from this manner, and because these are simply best practices and it works extremely well.
Yeah, I think people need to understand that when a suicide happens in a community, a small community, especially of a student, a lot of us saw it coming, and we didn't say something when we should have. Mm-hmm. But the impact is so far-reaching through the student body, because you don't know how many other young people are struggling with something, whether it's being bullied or being broken up with by a boyfriend or a girlfriend. That event gives them permission to walk that path out in their mind. And so, for the parents out there and the teachers out there, do not be afraid to ask the hard question. Do not be afraid. I think it's something you need to do with your kids when they're having a tough time. When you hear them say things that they shouldn't say, you need to ask the question. Like you said, are you going to hurt yourself? Are you thinking about doing this? And if so, we need to go talk to somebody. We need to sit down and take a step back and call time out and get our stuff together, because we don't want you to hurt yourself. Unfortunately, some of us have had to deal with these issues with people in our lives. It is not fun. It is not. It is challenging. It is sad. It is scary. But when you do things and you make the effort and you prevent somebody from hurting themselves, the thing that you've given that person, they can never repay you for, and you've changed the lives of tens and hundreds of people that are associated with them, and we've seen it. So please, 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 if you're listening today, listen to what Doc Vecchi said. Have the tough conversations. Be willing to step in a polite and professional way to try to get people the help they need.
Absolutely. And it's kind of strange but true, is that the very steps someone takes towards suicide, through the having the loss or the grievance,
yep,
and the idea that hurt themselves, and then they research and plan it and they prepare and they get the guns. It's very, very similar to what we've always talked about on this show regarding active killers and other targeted violence. The only difference is targeted violence is focused outward, and suicide is focused inward.
That's fact. It's the path to violence, but the violence is to yourself. So, well, Doc, great insight today. Always fun to see you. Hopefully I get to see you next Friday. Great things going on at SafeDefend. So you guys, if you haven't checked out our website, please do, www.safedefend.com. And with that, Doc and Dave, we are out of here.
Have a great weekend.